So I know you mentioned wanting to kind of brush up on World War II history. And today we're diving into a really harrowing event.
Okay.
It's often overlooked, too.
Right.
It's the Bengal famine of 1942-43.
Wow. Okay.
And what's really interesting is we're actually using a Spanish language YouTube video
Wow.
as our main source for this.
Okay.
So it's a chance for us to see how this story is being told
Yeah.
globally, you know, outside of like the typical Anglo-American
Absolutely.
narratives,
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's really interesting to see how
how it resonates.
it resonates in other parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible how a story like this,
Yeah.
with millions of lives lost,
Right.
can be so little known in some parts of the world, you know?
Exactly.
So this deep dive is a chance to really uncover a hidden tragedy.
Absolutely. So to set the stage, we need to go back to 1942.
Right.
World War II is raging.
And India, then under British rule,
Yeah.
is a key player in the Allied war effort.
You know, imagine the scale of India's involvement,
Yeah.
providing troops, resources,
Right.
all while grappling with its own internal struggles.
And then in 1942, Japan conquers Burma. And this is a pivotal moment that will directly lead to the famine.
So what's crucial to understand here is Burma's role.
Okay.
It wasn't just some far-off territory.
Right.
It was the source of 15%
Wow.
of India's grain supply.
15%.
That was like having a major artery severed.
Wow, I hadn't thought about it like that.
Yeah.
So with this vital food source gone,
Right.
the stage is set for disaster.
And sadly, disaster is exactly what unfolded.
Yeah.
But what makes the Bengal famine truly tragic
Yeah.
is that it wasn't just a natural disaster.
Right.
It was significantly exacerbated
Okay.
by British policies.
Okay, let's unpack that.
Sure.
What kind of policies are we talking about here?
Well, despite the loss of Burma and the looming threat of famine in Bengal,
Right.
the British continued diverting food
Okay.
from India to support their own war efforts elsewhere.
Wow.
Imagine this. 60% of Bengal's grain and rice requisitioned and sent off
Oh, wow.
to feed troops in Africa.
Requisition, just to clarify for our listener,
Sure.
that means the British government basically commandeered those supplies,
Precisely.
took control, and redirected them.
Exactly. And they didn't stop at food.
Oh, wow.
Vehicles, boats,
Really?
even elephants used for agriculture were requisitioned,
Yeah.
crippling Bengal's ability to produce and distribute
Yeah.
what little food remained.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It was a systematic dismantling
Yeah.
of their capacity to feed themselves.
And what's truly appalling is how some British officials reacted.
Right.
The video mentions one who actually suggested that Indian deaths would be a form of natural selection.
It's a chilling illustration of
Yeah.
the dehumanizing attitudes
Right.
that permeated colonial thinking at the time.
Mm-hmm.
These weren't just abstract policies.
Right.
They were fueled by a profound disregard for Indian lives.
And this brings us to Winston Churchill.
Oh.
You know, the iconic leader, the hero of World War II.
Right, right.
Well, his actions during the famine paint a very different
Yeah.
and deeply disturbing picture.
Churchill's role in this tragedy is complex and controversial.
Right.
He prioritized sending aid to the Soviet Union and Britain
Okay.
over addressing the desperate needs of Bengal.
Yeah.
His own words and actions reveal a shocking level of indifference, even hostility
Right.
towards the Indian people.
Yeah, the video highlights some of his particularly appalling remarks.
Right.
He reportedly called Indians the beastliest people in the world next to the Germans.
It's
And dismissed the severity of the famine. And then there's that infamous quote,
oh, right.
the one where he quipped, "If food is so scarce in India, why hasn't Gandhi died yet?"
It's a stark reminder
Yeah.
that even those we consider heroes can have deeply flawed and problematic sides.
It's hard to reconcile
Yeah.
that callous indifference with the image of the wartime leader
Right.
rallying the free world.
His actions and attitudes reflect a broader pattern of colonial exploitation and a deeply ingrained racism that shaped British policy in India.
Right.
These weren't just isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a system that devalued and marginalized entire populations.
And the human cost of this systemic neglect was unimaginable.
Yeah.
The video paints a horrific picture
Yeah.
of mass starvation, disease, and desperation.
Oh, yeah.
People dying in the streets,
Right.
British troops firing on those trying to access food stores.
Oh.
It's chillingly reminiscent of the Holodomor in Ukraine, a deliberate famine engineered by Stalin's regime.
The scenes described are truly harrowing.
Yeah.
The desperation was so severe that prostitution became widespread in Calcutta.
Wow.
As women and families resorted to anything to survive.
It's
a testament to the utter breakdown of social structures and the sheer will to live.
And then there's the staggering death toll.
Yeah.
An estimated 3 million people.
Right.
To put that into perspective, that's more than the entire population of Chicago.
Right.
A whole city wiped out by starvation.
It's a number that's almost impossible to comprehend.
Yeah.
A vast ocean of human suffering.
And what makes it even more tragic is that much of this could have been prevented.
Right.
So in the face of such a horrific crisis, what was the international response?
Yeah.
Surely someone stepped in to help.
Sadly, the response from the British government was delayed.
Yeah.
And woefully inadequate.
Okay.
They were more focused on winning the war than saving Indian lives.
Okay.
But surprisingly, aid did come from some unexpected quarters.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Sure.
Several Latin American countries, including Argentina and Mexico, sent shipments of food and supplies to India.
Yeah.
It's a little-known chapter of history that highlights a sense of global solidarity that transcended political divides.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable.
Humanity rising above the chaos of war, that's really inspiring to hear.
And believe it or not,
even
some of the Axis powers like Japan and Germany offered assistance.
Wow.
Though largely for propaganda purposes, of course.
Right.
They saw it as an opportunity to exploit the situation and undermine British authority in India.
Wow, that's a fascinating twist.
Yeah.
Using humanitarian aid as a political tool.
Right.
It shows the complex web of motivations at play during wartime.
Exactly. And it underscores the point that even acts of apparent generosity can be driven by self-interest or political maneuvering.
It's a reminder that we should always be critical and look beyond surface appearances. So we've seen how the Bengal famine exposed the dark underbelly of colonialism, the power of propaganda, and the surprising role of international actors.
Yeah.
What lasting impact did this tragedy have on India and the world?
The Bengal famine left deep scars on the Indian psyche.
Right.
It fueled resentment against British rule.
Yeah.
And contributed to the growing momentum for independence.
Okay.
It also had a profound impact on India's agricultural policies.
Okay.
And its approach to food security.
It's a reminder that events like this don't just fade into history. They have ripple effects that shape the future.
Absolutely. The Bengal famine is a stark example of how colonialism, wartime policies, and deeply ingrained prejudices can converge to create unimaginable suffering.
Right.
It's a story that needs to be told and remembered.
Yeah.
Not just as a tragedy, but as a cautionary tale.
What lessons can we learn from this? Beyond the historical facts? How can we ensure that such a tragedy never happens again?
I think one of the most important takeaways is the need for vigilance against the dangers of nationalism, colonialism, and racism.
Right.
These ideologies can blind us to the suffering of others and lead to horrific injustices.
We often think of these as things of the past, but they clearly continue to shape our world in profound ways.
Absolutely, and we have to be aware of how these ideologies can manifest in subtle ways, even in seemingly well-intentioned policies or actions. It's about recognizing the systemic nature of these problems.
It's about confronting uncomfortable truths about our history and understanding how they continue to impact the present.
Exactly. We also need to remember that history isn't just a collection of facts and dates. It's a living, breathing thing that continues to shape our world today.
The legacies of colonialism, racism, and war are still with us.
Absolutely.
They impact everything from global politics and economics to social justice movements and individual identities.
The Bengal famine is just one example of how these forces can converge to create unimaginable suffering.
Right.
But it's also a reminder that we have the power to learn from the past and work towards a more just and equitable future.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity and taking responsibility for creating a world where such tragedies are never repeated.
I think it's also crucial to acknowledge the resilience and agency of the people who survived the famine. Despite unimaginable hardship They found ways to cope, resist, and rebuild their lives.
It's easy to get lost in the scale of the tragedy and forget that there were individuals, families, and communities who lived through this nightmare.
Exactly.
And carried on.
Their stories deserve to be told and remembered, not just as victims, but as survivors who demonstrated extraordinary strength and resilience in the face of adversity.
And let's not forget the role of those who spoke out against the injustice, both at the time and in the years since.
Those who risked their reputations, their careers, even their lives, to expose the truth and demand accountability.
They are the unsung heroes of this story.
They are.
They remind us that even in the darkest of times, there are always those who are willing to stand up for what's right.
Absolutely,
They show us that individual actions can make a difference.
And those individuals can have a profound impact. Their courage can inspire others, change policies, and ultimately help prevent future tragedies. Their stories are beacons of hope.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on what this story means to us personally.
What resonates with you? What emotions does it evoke? And most importantly, how can we use this knowledge to make a positive impact in our own lives and the world around us?
Those are powerful questions for us all to consider.
They are.
We've uncovered a hidden tragedy, explored its complexities. And now it's time to think about how we can carry these lessons forward.
I agree.
It's easy to feel kind of overwhelmed, by the scale of the tragedy, the complexities of history.
Absolutely.
But I think it's crucial to remember that we have agency. We can choose to learn from this and act on that knowledge.
I completely agree. We can't change the past. But we can work to create a different future. So let's shift gears a little bit. And talk about what that might look like. What can we actually do with this understanding of the Bengal famine?
It feels daunting, right? Like these systems of oppression, the legacies of colonialism and racism, they're so deeply ingrained. Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with awareness, with education. The Bengal famine is just one example of a much larger story about how power, prejudice, and indifference can lead to unimaginable suffering. We need to keep these stories alive, not just as historical facts, but as cautionary tales.
So beyond just knowing about this, what are some concrete steps we can take?
Well, one powerful way to act is to support organizations and movements working to dismantle systems of oppression. There are countless groups out there fighting for social justice, racial equality, economic empowerment, and human rights.
We can donate to them. Volunteer our time. Or simply amplify their message by talking to friends and family, sharing information online, or participating in events.
It's not about feeling like we have to solve everything ourselves. It's about finding ways to contribute, even in small ways, to the larger effort.
And it doesn't have to be about grand gestures or huge financial contributions.
Exactly. It could be as simple as being more mindful of the language we use, the media we consume, the companies we support.
For example, are we supporting businesses that exploit workers in developing countries?
Are we paying attention to the biases in the news we read?
It's about making conscious choices.
Absolutely.
In our everyday lives.
Exactly. We can challenge racist or colonialist narratives when we encounter them. We can make an effort to amplify the voices of marginalized communities.
It's about actively working to decolonize our minds and our worldviews.
I agree. And there's so much power in collective action. When we join together with others who share our values, we can make a much bigger impact.
Absolutely. We can support policies that promote economic justice, racial equality, and environmental sustainability.
These issues are all interconnected. And we need to address them in a holistic way.
So that means getting involved in local politics. Contacting our elected officials. Voting for candidates who prioritize these issues.
It can feel overwhelming. But even small actions, multiplied by millions of people, can create real change.
It's about building a movement. One conversation, one choice, one action at a time.
And I think it's important to remember that This is a lifelong journey.
Right.
Not a destination.
Mm-hmm.
We're all constantly learning and unlearning, and we're bound to make mistakes along the way.
Right.
But the important thing is to keep striving to be better.
Yeah.
To do better.
Mm-hmm.
And to create a world where tragedies like the Bengal famine never happen again.
That's such an important reminder.
It is.
It's not about being perfect. It's about constantly challenging ourselves, expanding our understanding,
Absolutely.
and taking action with compassion and a commitment to justice.
This deep dive into the Bengal famine has been a powerful reminder that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks.
Right.
It shapes our present and influences our future.
Yeah.
It's a call to action, a challenge to confront uncomfortable truths.
Right.
And a responsibility to work towards a more just and equitable world.
Thank you for taking this deep dive with us.
Of course. It's been a pleasure.
I hope it sparked not just your curiosity, but also a sense of purpose and a commitment to making a difference.
I hope so, too.
The world is full of complex challenges.
It is.
But it's also full of incredible people working to make it a better place.
Absolutely.
Let's learn from the past, engage with the present, and work together to create a future where every life is valued and protected.
I completely agree.